Hello, and welcome to our fourth edition of Who Knew? Today, resident Bob Clewell will interview resident Dr. Sam Fuller, a plastic surgeon who, for 31 years, participated in Operation Smile. Operation Smile is a nonprofit organization that works in developing nations of the world, improving public health and performing corrective surgery on children with cleft lips and palates. Sam's humanitarian work has taken him to over 20 countries in Eastern Europe, Asia, South and Central America, the Middle East, and Africa. So I'm sure we're going to be hearing a lot about that today. And if you have any questions throughout the program, please be sure to call 6319. Jessica Corbett will be answering the phone and will take down your questions. She will then text them to me, and at the end of the program, we'll ask Sam your questions so he can answer them for everyone to hear. So without further ado, we'll turn it over.
Thank you very much. Before we begin, I must tell people why I'm here without my glasses. First time in 50 years I've appeared in public without them. I've had cataract surgery. I can see, and I'm delighted, and I praise the surgeons who performed such miracles. We have one such surgeon, miracle performer, with us this afternoon, and we're delighted to welcome Dr. Sam Fuller. Welcome, Sam.
Thank you.
Sam, a brief biographical sketch. He was born in the District of Columbia in 1948, spent his early childhood on Lookout Mountain, and moved to Atlanta by age 6. As a young man, he proved to be a very fine athlete. He was a nationally ranked tennis champion and used his tennis skills to garner a scholarship to the University of Georgia. After 3 years at the University of Georgia, he was accepted into the Emory University Medical School. He completed his surgery and plastic surgery residency at Wake Forest Hospital in 1978. And for the next 32 years, he practiced general reconstructive and cosmetic plastic surgery, first in Bristol and then in Lynchburg. 10 years into his practice, Sam started volunteering for Operation Smile, as we've already heard, a humanitarian effort to reduce the adverse impact of cleft lips and palates. And this is a worldwide operation and organization. Over a period of 25 active years working with Operation Smile, Sam deployed at least 20 times to remote locations worldwide, performing surgery, supporting indigenous public health measures. Following his active participation in these operations, he spent an additional 6 years on the board of Operation Smile. He now lives with his wife and childhood sweetheart, Carol Ann, in the Courtyard Apartments. They have 2 children and 6 grandchildren. Again, welcome, Dr. Sam. Let's get right into it. You spent your early school-age years in Atlanta. A lot of us have teachers whom we revere and who probably are role models for our early development and later development as well. During your time, you had 2 teachers, one good and one not so good, who inspired and motivated you to do well in the future. Can you tell us about them?
I can. First, I'd like to thank you, Bob, for this, you and both Ann Archer and Whitney, for this program, which I think is remarkable, particularly at this time with the pandemic, when we don't get to socialize. And part of what makes Westminster Canterbury such a great place is the socialization that goes on out here and getting to meet people and find out more about them. So I can't thank you all enough for this opportunity, and I've enjoyed every show so far, and I'm sure I will enjoy the ones to come. So again, thank you all for this gift. As far as growing up and teachers, I was early in my career was not a particularly good student. And in the 5th grade, I had a teacher, Mrs. Furlow, and my mother had to tell me that she was a really bad teacher because I didn't know it. I just assumed I was continuing to be a really bad student. And I remember being tutored in math so that I could get through the 5th grade. And I remember one of Mrs. Furlow's favorite things to do for us was she would hand us something to read and tell us to shut up for a half an hour. And we would have to sit at our desk with this reading that she had given us. And for a long time, I didn't read any of them, and found it incredibly boring and difficult to sit still. Eventually, I started reading some, parts of some. But one that really jumped out to me was an article about Albert Schweitzer. And Albert Schweitzer was a German theologian. He was a Lutheran minister. He was a renowned organ composer. He was a philosopher. And part of the way through his career, he decided, I'm not doing enough for the world and for people. I'm going to go to medical school. So rather late in his career, he went to medical school and then said, rather than working in Germany where most people can find a physician, I'm going to go to Africa where they don't have physicians. And spent the rest of his life in Gabon, what's now Gabon, Africa, and was awarded in 1952 the Nobel Peace Prize for his reverence for life. And I said, that's what I want to do. When I grow up, I want to be Albert Schweitzer. As a matter of fact, it's one of the things that when Carol Ann and I, who we first met in kindergarten, but when we started dating as juniors in high school, she later told me, she said, one of the things that attracted me to you was your feeling that you wanted to be Albert Schweitzer when you grew up.
Wow.
So,
well, I had Ted Williams for my idol,
yeah.
Albert Schweitzer. I'm sorry, you were way out of my league. Very good.
And the other one was a man named D.T. Lauderdale. D.T. Lauderdale Carol Ann and I ended up at a prep school in Atlanta. And it was a really, really good school. And I probably didn't belong there, but he taught senior English. And I was in the average class. And most of my friends were in the advanced class. And the first half of the year, we were taught Shakespeare. And I was so scared and knew I was going to flunk this course because it had such a reputation as being such a hard course. And it was like, oh my God, I'm going to have to study just to get through and graduate. And so I was working my tail off, and I would read the assignment at night and not understand one word. I understood the words, but what they meant nothing to me. It's like Greek. And I would go into class the next day, and he would start to explain what I had just read. And he was a nationally known Shakespearean scholar. And I would sit there just in awe. And I remember asking him one day, I said, I'm sorry, but I can't believe that any one person could have written all of this with intention and to know what they were saying, to know how funny it was and how belittling it was to kings and queens and whatnot, and be that smart. I don't think anybody can be that smart. And one day, one of my good friends from the advanced class told me, he said, we are so tired, sick and tired of hearing about Sam Fuller. And I said, what are you talking about? He said, it's all Mr. Lauderdale talks about in our class. Sam Fuller this, Sam Fuller that. Sam Fuller works so hard. He reads everything at night. He comes with questions. He takes copious notes. He's not nearly as bright as any of you. And you all are just lazy and you should use him as a role model. You know, and it spurred me on to go, I got to work harder, not only in English, but in everything. And for the first time in my life, I was on the honor roll.
Wow.
And it was a thing that you thought, wow, this feels good.
Yeah.
I think I'd like to do this some more.
Wow.
So he not only did that for me, I wanted to go to Vanderbilt University. I didn't have the SATs. I didn't have the scores. I didn't have the class rank for that. Like I say, the fire didn't light until my senior year. And he actually went and got me accepted it to Vanderbilt.
Wow.
So he was a huge influence on my life.
So he was an influence on your life, and you were an influence on the life of those people in the advanced course, because
I don't think they liked my influence in the advanced course.
Okay. As a young man, you were a gifted athlete, especially in tennis. I know you were a quarterback in football. You did all that good stuff. But you were especially good in tennis when you were really a nationally ranked junior player.
Correct.
And this opened up opportunities for you. Can you tell us about it, please?
It was amazing. I started when I was about 9. For my mother, tennis was summer camp. I had 2 older brothers. One was 10 years older than I was. One was 6, and they still are, 6 years older than I am. And
amazing that you never catch up.
It hadn't changed. Yeah, I can't catch them. But my mother would take my middle brother, and I both played tennis, and she'd drop us off at the country club at 9 a.m., around 9, and pick us up at 4:30. And the rules were stay out of trouble. The first time you get into trouble over here, your option is to go to summer school. So if you want to continue to be able to go to the club and play, then stay out of trouble. And so I played tennis every day of the summer, and we had a tennis professional there who spent 6 months in Ponte Vedra, Florida, and 6 months in Atlanta. And he had nationally ranked players from both places that he taught. And he was just a superb coach. And he would take us on trips during the summer. He would select some kids, usually in different age groups. He would rent a station wagon, and you'd have 2 players in the 14 and under, 2 in the 16 and under, and 2 in the 18 and under in a station wagon that would travel to North Carolina for the Southern Open, would travel to Cleveland, Ohio for the Western Open, would travel to Kalamazoo, Michigan for the Nationals. And it was such a great opportunity to see parts of the country that I never would have seen before. Right. And also to be a 13-year-old traveling with a 17-year-old. And the interactions and it was just a wealth of education. And during that time, there was a group of 4 of us that were in the same grade and ended up at the same high school that were good. I mean, we were my doubles partner, who eventually was the best man in my wedding, and I, at one point, were ranked number 4 in the country in doubles. Wow. And I actually, at another point later in my life, I was a alternate on the Junior Davis Cup team. Great. And I came to find out what that meant was nothing. I never heard from them. Nobody ever called me. I was never asked to go anywhere. But I can say I was an alternative for the Junior Davis Cup team. But our high school team was really, really good. We won the state championship 5 years in a row, and didn't have much competition, particularly down the ladder, because the 4 of us were really good, and you could find teams that had 1 or 2 good players, but very few had 6 good players, and we did. So we would travel occasionally to different tournaments, and we would go up, they would take a trip up to Chattanooga every year to play Macaulay and Baylor, which were prep schools, and they had really good tennis teams, competitive tennis teams with us. In my junior year, we went to Baylor, and it was on composition courts, slow courts, and we were known as Atlanta pushers. In other words, we just ran down balls and hit back one more ball than you were going to hit. And so I played a little kid that was 3 grades behind me when I went up there. And he was a crybaby. He played left-handed. He tried to hit the ball as hard as he could every time. He didn't hit any balls in the court. I beat him 6-love, 6-love. The next year, we went up there, and it was raining. So we had to go indoors, and we were going to play on indoor courts. And they just had 3 courts available. And I had looked ahead to see who I was going to play. And it was the same player. And it was like, I have so much work to do. I could be doing homework, and I have to travel up to Chattanooga to play this crybaby, turn around and go back. What a waste of my time. So I'm sitting and waiting for our court to come up when up next to me comes this towering, muscular figure. And he says, "I think we're supposed to play." And I looked up and I went, "No, I'm supposed to play Roscoe Tanner." And he looks down at me and he said, "I am Roscoe Tanner." And we went out to play, and needless to say, he had changed significantly in that year. And on hard courts, I couldn't handle this powerful left-handed serve or very many of his strokes. And I lost to him 7-5, 7-5.
Wow.
And I had contained myself, but I really wanted to cry and throw my racket and have temper tantrums. Roscoe Tanner went on to become with Jimmy Connors, 2 of the greats in the United States. And he actually lost in the finals of Wimbledon to Bjorn Borg one year. I never got to the Wimbledon finals. The other one was, another thing that happened was my junior year was the last year I traveled around. I didn't do it my last year in the 18 and under. So I was 17 in the 18 and unders and had an okay year. But when the final rankings came out, I was ranked number 43 in singles, which was okay. You'd say I should be in the top 20 next year when half of these people are gone. And I looked at the booklet that they sent out for the rankings, and number 39 was Ricky Nelson. And I did a little research. I said, this was Ricky Nelson, the man that sang Traveling Man, whatever.
The son of Ozzie and Harriet.
And the favorite son of Ozzie and Harriet. And the heartthrob of Carol Ann McKenzie at the time. And it was like, there is no way that Ricky Nelson could beat me. This is so wrong. And I found out that the rankings were based on mutual opponents. Because I said, Ricky Nelson never played in a national tournament. I've never seen him at any of these big tournaments. How could he be ranked ahead of me? And the word came back, it said, well, he only plays in California because he works. He has to work. And I'm like, he has to work. Baloney. These rankings are wrong because he's never beaten Roscoe Tanner.
You'll always have that to fall back on.
Exactly.
Let's see. You practiced plastic surgery first in Bristol, then in Lynchburg. Okay, that's 32 years, 78 to 2010.
Yes.
About 10 years into your practice, you began participating in Operation Smile. So let's get into Operation Smile a little bit.
Okay.
Tell us, what is Operation Smile and what does it do?
Operation Smile started in 1982 in Virginia Beach, Virginia. And it was and still is very much just the most amazing couple that I've ever met, Bill and Kathy McGee. She's a nurse, social worker. He's a plastic surgeon. But they're just incredible humanitarian people. He had gone to the Philippines in Manila to give a talk on cleft lip and cleft palate. And just walking the streets of Manila said there are hundreds and hundreds of people with clefts unrepaired. And so he started Operation Smile as a humanitarian organization to go worldwide and actually it just started in the Philippines, to return to the Philippines to say, I'm going to fix these clefts. I'm going to put together teams to come and fix these clefts. And at the same time, we might teach people about public health. We might work with emergency room physicians in underdeveloped countries, but very much started out as we would like to go abroad and fix cleft lip and cleft palate. And that's what they started doing, and that's what they still do today. Okay. And it's, there's no government funds or anything. It's a independent organization that raises all its own money for all of the trips that they take. And they have been to 60 different countries in their lifespan, having started just in the Philippines and have expanded to where they've been to 60 different countries.
Wow.
Yeah.
In the United States, I remember when I was a kid, you would sometimes see cleft lips. I don't think I've seen a person in the United States with a cleft lip in many years. So how common are cleft lips and cleft palates? And
worldwide, one is born every 3 minutes.
wow.
In this country, 1 in 700 births has a cleft, either of the lip or the palate or both. In underdeveloped countries, it happens about 1 in every 600 births. So it's pretty common.
We're competitive with other countries.
Yeah. Well, it's less in our country than in theirs, but not much.
Just slightly, yeah.
And it is not a genetic dominant. It just happens. Folic acid deficiency increases your risk. Anti-seizure medicines increases your risk. And Operation Smile has discovered in their research that cooking over an open fire for a prolonged period of time, in other words, if you live in a grass hut or you live out in the country and you cook over an open fire, you're at a much higher risk of having a child with a cleft lip.
Wow.
The reason we don't feel like we see them here is in this country, at around 10 weeks of age, your cleft lip is repaired, and that's going to be the most visible of the clefts. And your cleft palate is repaired by year 1, by 12 months of age. Thus, unless it's a family member or a close relative, you don't get to see it.
And is it just a cosmetic problem, or are there other problems associated with it?
It's very much, it's primarily a cosmetic problem. And yet, 15% of children worldwide will die from this before the age of 1, from malnutrition. And it's simply a matter, in this country with teaching, well, in any country, with simple education, it's a matter of, you think of feeding your baby. If you're breastfeeding, the child's down here horizontal. If you're bottle feeding, you're generally feeding this way. The child needs a bigger opening in the nipple of the bottle, and it needs to be bottle fed. And all you have to do is take that child and sit him upright to help feed. And it primarily has to do with the cleft in the palate, which is a hole in the top of the roof of the mouth, and the food potentially being aspirated and causing pneumonia and having them die from that, or from them just not being able to swallow it, take it in, and being so malnourished. Wow. But there's no reason for any child with a cleft lip or cleft palate to die. And that's part of the education process with Smile.
And how did you first get involved with Operation Smile?
I read an article in our national news about Operation Smile, and I thought, wow, this is Bill McGee. I don't know him, but he's a neighbor. He's down there in Virginia Beach. And this would have been in 1984. They'd been in existence for 2 years. Mm-hmm. And I thought, how many plastic surgeons are willing to give up three weeks of vacation to go to the Philippines to go fix cleft lip and palate? I'm going to volunteer and go. And I called up and volunteered and never heard a word from them. And a year went by and nothing happened. And So I looked at I was going to our national meeting out in Los Angeles that year, and I thought, Bill McGee's giving a talk about things that he's learned via Operation Smile. I'm going to go meet him, put my face in front of his face, and then he can't say no. And so I did that. And he said, oh, we'd love to have you. He said, when I get back home, I'll take care of this. If you haven't heard from us in 2 or 3 weeks, be sure and call me up. 3 weeks, I called him up. I said, Bill, didn't hear from you. He said, oh, I'm sorry, I forgot. I'll take care of it. Didn't hear from him. Another year goes by. One day I'm at our church, and there's a woman that I know, and her son is visiting her. And she said, I've heard you talk about wanting to go on Operation Smile trips. My son actually worked for them as a program coordinator for about a year. And he's visiting with me today. So I went and made a point of seeing him and explained my story. And he said, you've gone about it the wrong way. And I said, really? He said, yeah. He said, Bill is the ideal man. He's Mr. Theory. He is out there. He's always thinking of new things, coming up with new ideas. He's a great speaker. Kathy is the nuts and bolts and the program person and the get it done person. Call Kathy. I called Kathy. If this would have been in late November and told her I wanted to go, she called me mid-December and said, would you like to go to the Philippines in January? and it was actually a time when Corzine Aquino had taken over and in the Philippines, and she was kicking us off out of the military, our military out of Subic Bay. Mm-hmm. And I thought, is this safe? And she assured me, she said, we wouldn't send you if it wasn't safe. It will be safe. You tell anybody you're with Operation Smile, you are a king in the Philippines. Well, I came to read up about it. And the Philippines is like 9,000 islands. I said, how does one island know what the other island's doing? There was a little Filipino restaurant in Lynchburg, and I decided before we left, we should go eat so I can get a sampling of the food. And I told the owner, who was also waiting tables, that I was going to go to the Philippines in February. And he said, oh, you're going to go scuba diving. I said, no, there's an organization called Operation Smile. And before I could finish the sentence, he said, Operation Smile? Oh, he called people out of the kitchen to say, he's going to work for Operation Smile in the Philippines. He's going to Bukhalid in February. And when we went up to pay the bill, he said, no, you come eat anytime you want. So you felt a little better. You said, apparently this is a big deal over there. Yeah. And it was.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
What's involved in the cleft lip surgery?
It's
surgery?
Zach, if we could have that first photo, that'd be great. Between 8 and 10 weeks in utero, a couple of things happen. First, our lip elements come together. The columella is attached to our nose, which starts out between our eyes and drops down here, and the lateral lip elements come to join. At the same time, Zach, we can do the second photo, would be great. At the same time, you have palatal shelves, bone and mucosa, the lining, come down and come together to create the roof of your mouth. And somewhere in that 8 to 10 weeks, thanks, Zach, we can be done with it. Somewhere in 8 to 10 weeks, these elements don't fuse. And if your lip doesn't fuse on one side, you have a unilateral cleft lip. If it doesn't fuse on either side, you have a bilateral cleft lip, holes in both sides. And the palate can come together a little bit, or it can not come together at all. And so what we have to do is we have to reorient and refuse these elements together. Early on, people just sort of cut the edges off and pulled it together and just looked at the palate that you said, that'll never come together because it's bone. And you've got two bony shelves sitting miles apart.
Right.
And in 1952, a fellow from North Carolina named Ralph Millard When he lived in North Carolina, he was Ralph Millard. When he moved and had a practice, a more cosmetic practice in Miami, he was Ralph Millard. But anyway,
Okay.
Ralph Millard was in Korea during the Korean War, stationed in Korea. And he too, when he walked the streets of South Korea, said, there are just hundreds of unrepaired lips. So he started studying them, working on them, experimenting in different closures. And what he discovered is you have to first detach the muscular element, all the elements of the lip, and get the muscle back together before you put the mucosa on the inside and the skin on the outside together to get it to where it's much less noticeable and much more functional. He also took the mucosa off of the bone of the cleft palate and put that together. And he got the bone to actually come together and grow over this area and create a hard shelf up there.
Wow.
So each surgery takes the cleft lip takes about an hour and a half to do, unless when you first start out, like me, it would take about 2.5 hours. And a cleft palate would take about 2 hours. Or if you were me, it would be 3 or 4 hours. But if you do it enough times, you get better and better, and you get more familiar with the anatomy. In our country, they're always done as a youth. You want all of this done before a year of age, particularly to help develop the speech, so that you don't have this rush of air that goes through your nose and you become unintelligible. In the third world, if you don't have money and there's no national health to help pay for this, it doesn't get repaired.
Yeah.
And so you see much, much more of it in adults, young people, adults, kids, and everything, with a horrible social stigma to it than we do in this country. Yeah. It doesn't matter whether you have money or not in this country. Between crippled children, we worked out in Lynchburg where if I didn't charge a patient, the hospital didn't charge them. If the hospital didn't charge them, anesthesia didn't charge them. Wow. So one way or the other, through Medicaid, through crippled children, through insurance, whatever, you're going to get covered, and it will be repaired. So we just don't see deformities like you saw in those photos, like you do around the world.
Yeah, yeah. What's the selection process like when you go to a country? How do you choose who you're going to focus on in terms of the operations?
Generally, we throw out a word that says we're coming. Particularly early on, you put the word out, Operation Smile's coming, and they will fix you at no charge. And so you want to screen a lot of kids to be able to do enough cases. And the priority is to do the youngest children first. And in a lot of these countries, whereas we would do a child at 12 weeks, that child is malnourished and has to go through a program to get strong enough, big enough to tolerate general anesthesia. So about the earliest we would operate on any child on a trip like this, on missions, would be 6 months to a year. Mm-hmm. But that was the first priority. The younger, the better. The next priority would be age 5 or 6, because you're getting ready to start school. It's important that you be understandable, particularly if you have a cleft palate. Right. And then the next priority is age 15, 16, because then you're getting ready to be out of school and looking for a job and or hopefully a husband or a wife. And so those would be the priorities to say, these are the people we're looking at, these are the people we want to do first. Anything after that, we'll do time permitting. And it's mainly the health of the child. The child needs to be healthy, yep. not have a cold, not have the flu, and also to be big enough and strong enough to tolerate anesthesia. Interestingly enough, the first time I went to the Philippines, I prided myself on being able to operate on small children or children in the ER and to not have them scream the whole time. and might have a 6-year-old that you're going to have to sew up a cut on his face. And I would sit and spend 20 minutes talking to that child, face to face, this far from their face, to convince them that they were going to have fun doing this. And the first time I went to the Philippines, they told me I had a 9-year-old, and they said, you'll be doing this under local. I'm fixing a cleft lip under local. And you're like, I've never done a facial deformity under local in my life. And certainly not on a child. No. They said, they'll be fine. And I'm like, I don't. So I go into my spiel with this 9-year-old that comes to the table. So 9-year-old little girl on the table. And through an interpreter, I'm going to go and I'm going to spend 20 minutes mesmerizing this child and convincing her while I stick her face full of needles with the numbing medicine, she's going to enjoy it. And I go through my first lengthy paragraph. And the interpreter goes, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. I said, okay. And I said, did you tell her everything I said? He said, I told her what she needs to know. And I said, what did you tell her? She said, this is your one chance at getting your lip fixed. If you want it fixed, you'll hold still and you won't cry. She's fine. She was fine. Not a peep. She didn't move one muscle throughout. And it's just like, wow, this is different. So anyway, but yeah.
That's an interpreter to keep.
Exactly.
That's a keeper. How many total deployments did you go on, and what countries did you go to? How much time do we have?
I went on about 20. The very first one I went to was with it was to Zaire with a different group, and that was an interesting experience. But I went to the Philippines 4 times. I went to Romania. I was in Kenya 3 times, and Colombia, Russia, Nicaragua, Peru, Morocco, India, China, Madagascar, Jordan. So, interestingly enough, Operation Smile, particularly early on, wanted you to go to the same place every time. When I started in the Philippines, they were going to 3 different places in the Philippines and to Vietnam. And they wanted you to keep going back to the same city. And I never served in the military, and I would have loved to have been moved every 3 years. It's just in my nature. Yeah. I haven't seen it. I want to see it. I want to go. Yeah. And so I had to negotiate with them to be able to go to different places. They'd say, I want to go to Kenya this year. They said, well, we want you back in the Philippines. And he said, I'll go to the Philippines one more time if you'll let me go to Kenya next time. They said, if you go to the Philippines 2 more times, we'll send you to Kenya. So there was a lot of negotiating early on, but later on, with more and more sites available, early enough, you got to pick.
Okay. I'm sure some countries were easier to work in than others. What countries pose the biggest challenges to you?
Gosh, I guess the first one was Romania. Romania had just fallen. There had been a takeover, and they had killed Ceausescu the year before we went. Mm-hmm. And it was the first mission to Romania. And again, their charge is to put the word out on we're coming. Your child can have their cleft lip fixed. But you got to come and be screened, and this is the 2 to 3 weeks this is going to happen. Right. We got there, and they had we were planning to do 150 cases in 5 days, and they had for us maybe 20 patients to screen. And you're like, this is not good. And we actually got in cars and drove to orphanages to go scour orphanages. And it was incredible. Ceausescu had disallowed any type of birth control. You're to have as many children as you have. when you reach a point that you can't afford this child, you send him to the government. We will raise that child and he becomes a ward of the state. This was how he was going to build his army. And so people continue to have children. They sent them into the capital, and there were just hundreds upon hundreds of orphanages. And the general principle was 40 kids to a room, 20 cribs, 2 children in each crib, and what they did was sit and rock. They literally sat and rocked. And you had one nurse for 40 children.
Wow.
She would go around the room and hand them bottles. Then she'd come around the room, take the bottle, change the diaper, and her shift was over.
Wow.
Never spoke to them, never picked them up, held them, never sang, nothing. Wasn't part of her job. She had too much else to do. So these children, they didn't speak. They just sat and rocked.
Wow.
And it was simply just mortifying.
Wow.
What we did find was hundreds of club feet. And we had, in this country, you'd be splinted early on to take your clubbed feet and move them out. No splints. These kids their feet were frozen there. So we had a orthopedic surgeon along with us, or one came. It was actually Bill McGee's brother, who's an orthopedic surgeon, came, and we did 94 clubbed feet that we got from orphanages, because they actually had to take and break them to put them in place and then splint them. So we taught them how to do that operation. But it was just an amazing. And when we got finished, I was so disappointed. And interestingly enough, what we discovered in our back and forth saying goodbye and thank yous for helping us to the locals that had helped us, was they were so appreciative, because they said, "You have taught us so much." And you said, "Well, we wish we could have taught you about cleft lips." And he said, No. What you've taught us is what we have been told has been a lie all along. We have been told for all our lives that we, as communist Romania, will bury you because you all don't know how to work. You all are born with a silver spoon in your mouth, and we will just run over you. And in our country, when we would operate, room 1 ran out of suture, not when we were there because we brought everything we needed. But in their country, if room 1 in the OR ran out of suture and you went to room 2 and asked for some, they wouldn't get it. This is our suture. This is all we got. You're not getting it. Right. The equipment was old and worn out. And they said, "You taught us how to work together." When we first started working, we said, we'll operate from 8 a.m. to 7 or 8 at night. And they said, "No, you won't. We're leaving at 3. They left at 3. We continued to operate. The next day, they stayed until about 5. And by midweek, they were staying until 8 o'clock and helping us and operating with us and everything. And they said, "We've never seen anything like this. This is an unbelievable revelation. Thank you."
Wow.
Yeah.
Great.
The other one was Russia, which before we got there, I was told, I was in charge on that trip, and first thing, we were told that we were, unless we paid, I forget the number, some incredible sum of money, we weren't going to be allowed to come into the country. The airport and security wouldn't let us through. We found out that, and again, this was after the fall of the communism, and they said that you have to pay us this much money to come in. We said, "We're bringing all kind of equipment. We're leaving computers with you. We're helping your surgeons fix their own kids. Why would you charge us extra money just to come in?" And we found out that the mafia was running all the security in the airports at the time. And I was told, said, "You're going to have to help bring in part of the anesthesia equipment. You're going to have to bring in some of the fluids in your bag. And everybody's going to have to help bring stuff in." I said, how do I explain that when I go through security? And they said, "It's just your own personal equipment that you might need while you're here." And I went, really? So we did. But from the minute we hit the ground running, the answer to most of our questions was niet. Nope, can't do it that way. Nope, that's not the way we do it. Nope. And we worked our way through it. We didn't do nearly as many cases as we wanted to, but Bill McGee came. It was actually on our World Journey of Hope, which was a sort of 20th anniversary celebration. And we were going to all countries. And Bill McGee was flying in an airplane from site to site to site and doing some surgery on the plane with people. And he came and he gave this wonderful talk. I went with my interpreter, who was a ear, nose, and throat doc that had been with me on all my operations. And we sat down to watch this big national TV program where the head of pediatric surgery at our hospital in Moscow was talking with Bill McGee. And Bill gave this wonderful speech about how wonderful it was that the Cold War was over, that we were talking with each other, we were working with each other. It's a brand new day. We loved learning from the Soviet surgeons, their techniques, and loved fixing the children of Russia. And the longtime Soviet oligarch pediatric surgeon got up and gave her talk. And I asked my interpreter what she was saying. He said, I can't tell you. And I said, no, really, what's she saying? He said, I hope Bill McGee doesn't have an interpreter. She's criticizing how bad you all are, how little you know, and how difficult it's been to teach you the right way to do things. And I said, really? And Bill's sitting there smiling and nodding. He said, there you go. So, yeah, that was Russia.
Wow. Tell me, what are your best memories of being on Operation Smile?
Wow, so many. One of the first ones was in India. There was a little old lady that came. She went through screening. It was where we had our center, so we could do as many cases as we wanted to do, and so we were doing older people, catching up on. We were actually there to do 25,000 cases over a 5-year period, and this wonderful 73-year-old woman came in, which is unusual for me to be operating on a cleft lip on a 73-year-old. And she had a unilateral cleft lip. And she told me she wanted it fixed. And I said, okay, we can do that. And she pulled out a well-used mirror and held in one hand, and then took her other hand and perfectly pulled this lip together to where it just looked as normal as could be. And she said, that's exactly the way I want it to look when you're finished. And I said, oh, that's a lot of pressure. You're the first cleft patient I've ever had that told me exactly what you wanted to look like. And she did it again, and she said, this is exactly what I want it to look like. And fortunately, as we mature, we don't heal quite as fast as we used to. But by the same token, we don't scar nearly as much as we used to. And we have some wrinkles that can hide scars. And this ended up being one of the more perfect results that I ever had on this little 73-year-old lady. And I used to love to see her come, and she
it's a good thing.
She appreciated my work very much, but she would bring me the most wonderful spicy Indian food every time she'd come for a follow-up visit. And it was like, you're the best, It was a wonderful relationship. One of the things that happens with every Operation Smile trip that I ever went on was on the flight over, I would inevitably be thinking about the things that I should be staying at home for. When I signed up for this trip 6 months to a year ago, I didn't know I was going to have this. It's either a patient that's not doing as well as I would like, or it's a teenager at home that's not doing as well as I would like, or it's a wife that's saying, you're really going to go for 3 weeks now? And you just think, God, this is not a good time to be going. And then, by the same token, on every mission I've ever been on, there's a tap on your shoulder from it, he, she, God, that says, this is where you're supposed to be. And one of those was happened in, it was in Nakuru, Kenya. And I was in charge of the whole operation. And we were doing screening, and you do 2 days worth of screening. Nakuru was kind of in the balance. I had been told this isn't working out for us. They're not getting the people that we need. We're not doing as many cases, and this is a make or break trip. We need to get 150 cases done, or we're just not going to go back. We're going to tell them we're not coming back. And so as the team leader, I'm thinking, we're not only going to do 150 cases, we're going to do 175. We're getting the word out. And so you screen for 2 days, and at the end of 2 days, you come and you have to decide you've screened hopefully enough patients, and then you decide who are the 150 you're going to do, because you need to let them know, and then you need to let the people that didn't make the cut know you can go home and you have to come back next year. But you'll be prioritized for next year because you missed the cut this year. So we actually screened almost 300 patients, which was remarkable. And so in my mind, we're not only doing 150 cases, we're going to do 175 cases, which means at some point in time, I'm going to let 125 people know you didn't make the cut. And inevitably, on every trip, there's a new nurse, a new doctor, somebody it's the first time they've been here. We'd finished our screening. During that same trip, there had been a big political trial in town in Nakuru. So Reuters, the Australian Broadcasting Company, the BBC were there. We had a communications or somebody that was in public relations that was on our team that had come to help with development for the community. And she had gone out and she had contacted all of those news agencies and said, you need to stay for 4 more days to do this wonderful human interest story on Operation Smile. You pick out a candidate, we'll do them first thing Monday morning, and you pack up your things and go, but you've got a great story about this. And you go through the screening with them and decide which patients you want done. She had told them that. And I'm like, that's not the way this works. Yeah. He said, if they pick an adult or a teenager, we don't do them first thing Monday morning. They are not our priority. And she said, well, they have to be now. And it's like, wait a minute, who's in charge here? and then the next thing, was Monday morning, sometime Monday, President Mobutu, president of the country, is coming by for a photo op. You will be showing him around, taking him around, and showing him the OR and everything. And he wants to be seen as, see what's happening because of me. And I went, really? Monday morning? Good. And so we finished screening. We're actually packing up the equipment and getting ready. There are 4 of us that are going to go decide who's in, who's out with all the cases that we've got. First time ever traveling nurse comes in from the front, and she said, there's a little boy and a mother that wants to see you. They've come for screening. And I said, they missed screening. Like I know, we're finished. And she said, you won't believe the story they have of how they got here. And I said, everybody has an unbelievable story to get here. You go out and tell them, I'm sorry, you missed screening. Come back next year. I've got work to do. And she teared up just a little bit. And, I'm frazzled. I got things I got to do. She goes out. We finish packing. We head off for our room to go decide who's going to be done. She comes back in. Now she's really crying. And she said, I said, what did they say? And she said, they said they'd wait for you. And she said they walked 6 hours from their home to get to a bus, and they rode the bus overnight to get here to Nakuru, and they've walked for another 7 hours to get here. And I said, I said, I tell you what, I'll go out and talk to them, but when we get finished deciding who's going to get done and who's not, you have to go tell 175 kids that they're not getting done. And she went, really? And I said, no, I'll go talk to them. So I went out, and Zach, if you could do this photo. So I meet Joseph. I see Joseph. Joseph looks like a pretty normal-looking 8, 9-year-old boy with his mom standing next to him. And so I look at him, smile, and I've got my interpreter, and I ask Mom, I said, we exchanged some pleasantries, and I say, why are you here? And she said, Joseph came last year here, and you all fixed his cleft lip. He came this year to show you how handsome he is. You know?
Wow.
And I looked down, and you couldn't even tell that he had his lip fixed.
Wow.
And, you know, and you think, okay, there are taps on the shoulders, and then there are anvils that fall on your head to say, this is where you're meant to be, and this is why I brought you here.
Wow.
So, and again, it's just, it happens so often.
Yeah.
Another one was, I was in Morocco, my roommate, and Morocco, I was actually in Marrakesh, which sounds pretty exotic, and it is. If you're sleeping and at 4 a.m. in the morning, right outside your window is the call to prayer, it's pretty remarkable. My roommate was from Casablanca. He would get up at 4 a.m., go face east and pray. And I'm listening to the call to prayer. But anyway, the first day of surgery, he and I are sharing a room. His operating table's here, my operating table's there. I've finished my second case. He's still operating. I sit in the corner, and I look up from writing my orders, and anesthesia's waking my child up. And I look up, and we could have that other picture, and Azzedine Bellamine is his name. He's over operating on his table. He's from Casablanca. He's operating on a child from Marrakesh. His anesthesiologist is from Panama. And back in the room, the circulating nurse that he has is from Vietnam. And over on my side of the room, my anesthesiologist is from Italy, and my circulating nurse is from South Africa. And I'm, of course, from America. You know, and I just stopped and thought, wow.
Wow.
If you want to change the world for the better, said, none of these people are here with the thought of what's in it for me. They're here to serve these children of Morocco.
Yeah.
And what a difference that makes. The spell was broken when my South African nurse asked me, she says, shall I fetch the stretcher then? And I just looked at her and I said, I'm sorry, could you say that again? She said, shall I fetch the stretcher again? And I said, that is so poetic. And she said, I don't understand what you mean. I said, in my country we say, can you get the stretcher? So there's always something. And I'll, if I have time, one more. And the one more was, it happened in 2004. 2 years before, Carol Ann and I are driving home from Atlanta. We've been down to Atlanta to visit our folks. Her dad has had 2 heart attacks in previous years. He's diabetic, and the diabetes is not going well. And he's getting health care at home, and my dad has Alzheimer's. So we go down to visit them as frequently as we can. And we're driving back, and Carol Ann says, what would you think if I went to nursing school? She's 48 years old. And I'm thinking, and our kids are grown. And it's like, I think that'd be great. Why would you do that? And she said, I want to be able to help your dad and my dad, and I can't even help them get out of bed. And I feel like I should know more. And I'd like to go on trips with you. I think this would be fun. And so she went, she first got her LPN, which drove her mom nuts. She said, "Why would you go for an LPN? You need to be an RN." She said, "Well, I might not like it, and that's only 16 months." Well, she liked it, and halfway through, she went on to get her RN. She graduated valedictorian from both classes. And in 1994, 2 years after she started, when I was deciding where am I going, I said, "I'm not deciding, you decide." So in 1994, she went on her first Operation Smile trip with me.
Wow.
So, yeah,
Great.
yeah.
How are you doing time-wise?
Well, we are running short on time, but we do have a couple of questions that came in, so if we could ask those.
Sure.
One is from a fellow doctor in our virtual audience, and he wanted to know who follows up on the surgeries.
Great question. You know, it used to be that we kind of did. You know, you'd say, "We'll be back next year," to whatever the location was. And we trained we would get some of the local surgeons to say, "Would you please follow up in case there's a problem?" But they generally wouldn't know how to fix it. Operation Smile has evolved from how many cases can you do as quickly as you can get them done to where we now, how many people can you train to do this? What we would like to do is go into a country or go into a city and make ourselves obsolete over the period of about 8 years to say, we're training you to do this. Not only how to fix the cleft lip and palate, not only how to take care of it, not only how to pick the patients, but also how to raise the money to do it. And we have now moved on to where what we generally would like to do is actually build a center within that country, like the one that I went to in Guwahati, India, where you'd say the center is there. And for that entire province, where we estimated were 25,000 unrepaired clefts, we now have a center that we will ship people in that works, 5 days a week just fixing cleft lip and palate.
Oh, that's incredible. Y'all really have turned this into quite an
Yes.
organization.
Yeah.
One other question, is Operation Smile a part of Doctors Without Borders? And then part 2 to that is, if someone wants to donate to Operation Smile, how would they do that?
Great. They are not part of
Doctors
Without Borders. And actually, there's been a spinoff from Operation Smile called Smile Train. And way too long of a story to get into on the split off, but they're different organizations. Smile Train tends to use local physicians and doesn't do nearly as much training as Operation Smile. And Operation Smile is easy to find. You just go to Operation Smile Inc. Or you go to operationsmile.org. And trust me, they'll teach you how to donate.
The donate now button should be there.
Yes.
Well, this has just been lovely. I mean, I know y'all are technically transforming smiles, but you've transformed so many lives along the way, and it's been wonderful to hear about it. And I'm sure folks are going to have more questions as they pass you in the hall, but we really appreciate you taking the time to share this with us. So thank you so much.
I appreciate it. It's been a great opportunity.
Thank you. And now, Bob, I know you had a few last words.
Thank you, Whitney. Next time you see Dr. Sam in the hall, ask him about necrotizing pneumonia. That's something we didn't get to talk about today, but you'll be fascinated. Next time on Who Knew, February 17th, Ann Archer will interview Tower resident Betty Dementi, an American citizen born in Sweden who came to Richmond as a child in the 1930s. Her father was in the tobacco business. She attended St. Catherine's and Vassar College, taught English, is still active in the affairs of the flourishing Dementi Studio and Photographic Archives. Betty will tell us what it was like to be a foreigner in Richmond during World War II and regale us with her adventures in the Peace Corps in Africa after her retirement. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in.